All right, good evening and welcome to tonight's Finance Committee meeting. It's February 3rd. And tonight, this is a meeting, the next meeting, I guess, in the process of our fiscal year 26 budget. Tonight, we're going to be looking at food service budget presentation, adult education presentation, the fiscal year 26 instruction and technology budget. See a little bit of discussion on MOE updates and some capital maintenance, special education, if there's any discussion coming from last week or thoughts we wanted to talk through. A quick little update on some warrant article adjustments from previous years and public comment. So with that, I think we will get started with the food service budget. And I forgot to say, Amanda Johnson will be here to present for us. So thank you very much for coming.
No problem. Hold, please. Oops. There you go. Hi, I'm Amanda Johnson. If I haven't met you before, I'm the food service director. So what I like to do is kind of talk a little bit about my team. I think it's really important because it kind of navigates a path to how we're able to do what we do. So my team is made up of 25 people. They're very dedicated. We have tenure from 1 year to 41 years. And they're a lot of the reason that we are able to make the cuts and be able to control our costs and expenses because they're really focused and they take direction and they put a lot of effort in every day. So about our program, right now on average, we serve about 1,876 breakfasts a day and 3,340 lunches a day, and almost 400,000 meals we served last year. For this year, we're currently on track to serve 4% more in breakfast and 5% more in lunch. And that's important as we go through reimbursement and how I'm able to fund my program independently. So for participation, that's a big focus. That's how we make our money. So for the school year of 2024, we did 37% participation for breakfast and 66% for lunch. Currently for this year, we're at 41% for breakfast and the state goal is 40%. And for lunch, we're at 71% and the goal is 80% for the state. So we've made some really good progress with some of our initiatives and we're continuing to focus on hitting the state goals and increasing that. I mean, the dream would be 100% participation where we can feed the students for free. And the reimbursement rate from the state, we get $2.28 for each breakfast and $4.33 for each lunch. And that's really important because a lot of our focus from the tools we put in place last year is really emphasizing that all of our expenses fall within being reimbursed in that plate cost. So we're getting that money back and we don't have to ask for additional funds. Some budget increases this year. I just increased the food cost line for the anticipated increase in cost of goods. And then reductions, I reduced bottled gas by $4.20 and that was just based on what we've been trending in usage. And then my biggest reduction is the contingency fund. I think it's something we asked for several years because we needed it. Now that all students eat free and we're properly tracking our expenses and where our money is going, it's not something that we need anymore. The goal of the food service program from the state is to be able to pay your own way. And that is something that we have focused on. We have funds in reserve set aside, so we'll be able to maintain this for the next several years. And with our catering and our controlled costs, we'll be able to continuously put that money back in. So we should be able to maintain this for quite a while. How we're going to continue to maintain this decrease in funding. We're going to continue to increase participation. I think it shows in our results that we're able to do that. We're doing a lot of better quality food and food that we can trust. I think a lot of our focus is on making sure that parents know that they can trust us to take care of their students. We're focusing on scratch cooking and whole foods and local foods being brought in. And it is a slow process and it's a lot of work, but it does save us a lot of money to do those things. And it's a better for you product for our students. Just some different things we do. We do a new recipe meeting each month where we all get together. We talk about the menus. We cook things from scratch and taste test them together. again, to have the more local and less processed. And then we updated our menu program this year, which was within our software budget. It was actually less than our software budget, but I left my software budget alone because I am going to need to upgrade registers over the next few years. So that point was to be inclusive so parents could feel comfortable using the tool. And if their students have dietary needs or allergies, or they want to know what we're serving their children, it's really easy to use. And that's we're continuing to work on that to update it. And by the end of the school year, it will be a true vision of what we're doing. Our budget is something I go into every single day. I have a declining checkbook. Anytime we pay something, I make sure we're where we need to be. I meet monthly with my head cooks to go over their funds and what they're spending and their plate cost. We put together action plans if we're outside of that and quickly correct it. So knowing where we're at financially all the time has been really helpful in being able to decrease that and continuing forward. We put a lot of focus and push on the economic forms this year, which made a huge impact with funding for our district. And we'll continue to do that. And all main care students are now part of free and reduced, which increases our reimbursement amounts. So we'll continue to put focus on that. We're trying to put focus on cutting our paper costs and use less paper, less plastic specifically. So we've been filtering in some more biodegradable. And instead of having a package for each item, we're trying to streamline so that we only have, 2 different choices of packaging and we can use everything in it. And that has saved us a lot of money in paper. And then lastly, I'm utilizing grants and partnering with people. We've partnered with a lot of other people locally who will come to our schools and they'll do free taste testing and they give us free product. And if we sign up to be, a local partner, they give us free things. We're a big piece of my presentation is kind of talking about the Grains on the Go project, which is a really exciting initiative. But that being part of that gives us a $25,000 equipment grant each year. So I don't have to keep buying new equipment. I'm using that to upgrade my equipment. We started partnering with Food Rescue Maine and we're putting together a program to control and reduce food waste, which will help us financially. But then there's also grants we can get if we decide at some point we'd like to do composting and work with other projects. So we're really looking around to see what we can utilize for resources externally to be able to fund our program as well. So Good Grains on the Grow is really the big project beyond the things that we've already started. This is a 4-year project that we committed to and were awarded by USDA, Full Plates, Full Potential. We were given $1.5 million with the Good Crust that's located up in Skowhegan. We did a lot of work with them last year. The purpose of this project is to change out school food so it's minimally processed, it's healthier options, and it's locally sourced. So our part in this is that we get to taste test the product for free. They're coming to the classrooms and doing grain education, and we're spending some time also educating students on where food is coming from, which I think is really important and very cool. So we get benefits, the equipment grant, the free product, and then what our job is after we taste test it is help them price point it so we can get rid of it or put it out nationwide to other schools. A lot of the feedback why we can't do local and we can't do scratch cooking is because it's time consuming and it's expensive, and it is. And that's where we're coming into play with them to kind of help innovate and change the way that we feed children across the United States. It really is going to end up being a nationwide project. So again, the students receive the free products, taste testing. We've been to a couple 4th grade science classes and social studies classes, and we're teaching them where, about Maine agriculture and where their grains come from and where fruits and vegetables come from. We've talked about scarcity in Maine. And so it's really tying the kitchen and our program into the educational piece, which is very special and makes it really cool I've had a lot of parents reach out that they think it's really neat to be a part of it. So some of the things where we have local farmers on standby so we can get cheese from Pineland Farms for some of the products. We've got harvesting good broccoli as part of the product. We've got blueberries from Maine and tomatoes and potatoes. And so we've partnered with some local college chefs, another food service director, the Good Crust, and then local farmers to bring this kind of to life, which is really cool. So what we're working on next, we're continuing the Good Crust on the Go. Like I said, it's a 4-year project. Right now we're working on making some Maine agricultural magazines for students, and we're working on books and some virtual field trips. I'm putting together the food waste study pilot, which will roll out at one of our elementary schools first. And the purpose of that is to find out why we waste the food we do, what we can do to combat that. And, we talk about composting, but I think that's the last resort. We want to work backwards and find out why our students aren't eating with us. Lowering sugar and added sugar is a 2027 goal for the state of Maine. It's something that my team has started working on currently, and we're adjusting. So that's part of our new recipe meetings, is how are we going to make this taste good for the students and continuing to make it a better choice. And then we're continuing to partner with more local companies and farmers just to support our mission of eating more Maine in the schools. That's all I have.
I don't really have a specific question. I'm really excited about the work you're doing with like local producers from farms and companies and whatnot. And I think that's great. And I think that's the right direction to go. And I just also want to say what a great job you've been doing with the program, broadly speaking. My kids, I've got 2 elementary students. They eat school lunch every day. They've long since stopped asking me to make something for them. So they're always happy with what comes. So thank you so much.
My students' lunch. They won't do it.
Well, you're doing something right. So truly, thank you so much.
Thank you.
Yeah, I would quickly add too, my kids want to come here for breakfast now too often and rather than eat at home. So you're doing a great job.
I love that.
And I really appreciate getting to see and spend some time here tonight on what you guys are already doing, all these innovative things. That's super interesting. So thanks for all that insight.
Of course. Thank
It's
you.
great work.
Thank you.
Quickly, I do want to thank Amanda because she was really instrumental in increasing our economic disadvantage form. She is so organized and really helped move that along.
Thank
So
you.
thank you for that, Amanda.
Of course. Yeah. Thank you. Thank you, guys. Have a good night.
Thank you. All right, Alan, we're ready for the adult education budget and Alan Lampert.
Evan's going to handle the technology. And so I'll just start with some basic thumbnail sketch information. We're currently running at around 7,500 enrollments for this year. That's kind of where we'll be. We're doing that, offering approximately 216 classes at 35 locations. And we employ over 180 people in total. That's admin staff, teachers, and everyone. The bulk of that number is part-time non-contract staff, okay? So the first thing I just want to say about the budget is this is typically what the board sees. It's sort of the program summary of what we plan on doing next year. I have good news. I have news that isn't quite so good. And then I have a challenge that Evan and I are currently working on. So I'll just kind of lay it out that way. So the good news is at the top there, that blue, we are definitely going to be proposing a budget for next year that is going to be less than this year's operating budget. The more good news is that number for the proposed 26 budget is going to be even less than what's there. I'm going to knock it down even further, okay? The not so good news has to do at the bottom of the program summary sheet for local share numbers. And here it gets a little strange. I'll start with Brunswick. Brunswick was supposed to approve a total of $176,619 for this past budget year. I heard from Phil that they actually approved a warrant of $184,035 for this operating year, which is great. We got extra money. The problem with that is that it threw the percentage allocation that we have with our partnering districts, it threw it a little bit out of kilter. So what I'm proposing to do is have the other 2 local shares go up by 4% for MSAD 75 and RSU 1 for next year. So we'll be going from 168,647 to 175 for MSAD 75 and 117,437 to 122 for RSU 1. And I'm thinking that next year, the following year's budget, we'll be able to get everybody back in line with the interlocal percentages. That's how I kind of see it. But there will be a modest increase of 4% for both MSAD 75 and RSU 1. So that's my not so good, kind of good news type of thing, 4% increase. The concern that I have, and Evan and I have been talking about this today, and we're actually going to be working on it later this week, is the fund balance. So the fund balance has been drawing down steadily. Quite frankly, our burn rate is a little bit more than what I really want it to be. So I need to slow down the burn rate on the fund balance, okay? So as you can see, the fund balance that we're proposing is going to be a $94,000 increase from last year's to the proposed budget for this year. I want to reduce that fund balance amount, and there's a number of different ways I can make that happen. The big number that we're kind of set with that I can play with a little bit, I'm going to play with it more, is the 6,000 line for administration and student support. That makes up the lion's share of our budget, really does. That's the salaries for all the administrative staff, the administrative support staff. That number includes all the money that we spend on the catalog, printing, advertising, marketing. So it's a big number, professional development. The numbers I just said to you there, that all comes from our fund balance. We support all of those general ledger lines. I'm going to look at maybe trying to reduce those more. I'd like to try to reduce the fund balance that we're proposing down to around $50,000 increase, not a $94,000 increase. And I think that number would be much more palatable for our program moving forward. Right now, we were kind of operating a little bit in the blind here for a number of months, unfortunately, that we didn't have an audited number for the fund balance for our program. We were kind of running blind. But we're starting to gather numbers, and we think we're sitting around just under $200,000 currently in the fund balance right now today. But I know that in the next 60 days, that number is going to shoot up because we have a new catalog coming out, and we're going to see a rush of revenue coming in. But of course, that's gross revenue. Once we take out expenses from that, I think our fund balance is going to be fairly healthy as we move towards the end of this fiscal year into the new year. But I really want to reduce the burn rate on the fund balance. I really, really want to lower that. The other thing I'll just mention is that when I was the director here a number of years ago, when I first came on, we realized, Mark Conrad and I, that our fund balance was way too high. We really had to draw that number down, and I think we kind of overachieved a little bit on that, okay? The other thing we did was, and we needed to kind of do this, was our driver's education car fleet had really aged, and we really needed new cars. So since I've been here, we've kind of bought almost a new car every year. One year we had to buy 2 cars because a number of our cars were just like Evan was talking about. He was driving around in a Dodge Neon for driver's ed. He's one of our former students, by the way, so for driver's education. Yeah, he'll vouch for us. But he was in a Dodge Neon. That car went away pretty much, I think, a year after I came on board, but we've had a number of other cars we had to replace. But we have a much newer fleet, and I really want to do things like reduce those types of expenses moving forward to really kind of just get better control of the fund balance and how much we're drawing each year. So the bottom line for us, if we go back to the top left corner, is we're looking next year's budget, proposing a budget that's going to be at a minimum almost $7,000 less than last year, but I'm anticipating that number is going to be even higher. We're going to ask for a budget that's below last year's number, probably by 2-3%, maybe even more, which I think is probably a good thing. The weird thing is that we're asking for a reduction in the overall budget, but the local share amount's going up 4%. We're making that up with the fund balance. That's where the money's getting drawn from. Okay. Are there any questions? Yeah.
I can't remember, so I would love a refresher. Do you adjust your pricing for the courses every year, or like how do you price your courses?
Yeah, they're priced every year for every catalog. We speak to instructors, and we're very fortunate that we're in a demographic area where we have a lot of retirees that are on fixed incomes, but many of them have done very well, and they have disposable income. It's not uncommon for when our catalog comes out, for some people to spend up to $1,000, $1,200 on like 3 or 4 classes. That's not uncommon. So. Any other questions?
This line right here is our state subsidy, which just came out Friday, so it's a $218, almost $19,000 state subsidy. And that number is final.
So apologies if I'm asking a dumb question. So the fund balance change right now is that $92,000 increase in use of fund balance versus last year. That's what's in this budget.
Correct.
And you're trying to shrink that number, or you're happy with that number for where it is for next year?
I want to shrink that number.
Okay. So it's below the 50%, 56% increase is what you want to, what you're aiming for there.
I want to drive that down further.
Great. Thank you.
Absolutely. And by doing that, it'll reduce the total budget.
There's not funding to make up for that. That's just going down.
Yeah. Anybody else? Oh, come on, guys. Let me have it. Yeah.
When Brunswick essentially overpaid last year,
Yeah.
so wouldn't that just reduce what they pay next year and keep everyone else the same?
That's one way to do it, or just leave them where they are. So they're just going to pay that amount and we'll have everybody else just kind of catch up. Eventually, the percentages will realign, I think, after this. Once we do this, I think the following year, I think it'll pretty closely realign to where it should be. I mean, you know, we could send them back the money, but I'd rather not do that, so.
Right, well, we're gonna get interest on it, right? It's sitting in a bank somewhere.
I mean, maybe if we're lucky, Brunswick will send us another $8,000. Okay, thank you for your time.
Thanks, Alan. All right, and now Amanda Hersey for the instruction technology.
Yes, thank you. Well, I'm going to talk about instruction. And I said with confidence when Nick was setting this up that I knew what I was doing, but I'm not sure I do. I'm going to try. I don't. Yeah, okay. Okay. Yes, so I'm going to talk about curriculum instruction and assessment tonight, and I do want to talk about what that actually means. Okay, so for this year, my goal in creating this budget, because we are going to, I do have some asks and increases. The goal for that was to support the use of research-based materials and effective assessment tools so that the resources are strategically in our classrooms to improve student outcomes. We are looking at some changes with instruction as we've learned more about research-based instruction through the science of reading. And we've seen from our principals' presentations that the math scores we need to look a little bit more at those math scores, and looking at some program changes or instructional strategy changes are something that we're budgeting, or I'm budgeting for this year. Sometimes people use the term curriculum to mean everything that's happening in the system. Curriculum is our plan, our learning standards, our learning goals for what we want our students to learn at the end of every trimester, quarter, the rigor that we've worked into those standards. It's rare that curriculum changes. So when you hear somebody say curriculum changes, they're probably meaning instruction with materials and instructional strategies. Lesson plans that are more rigorous, bring in some outdoor learning, project-based learning. Those changes are really necessary as we adapt to new knowledge, new materials, new tools. And assessment is a part of what we do as we measure that learning. So we do want to be able to know where our students are pacing. So this has all been looked at a little differently this year as there are some changes. So the considerations for this budget for this year are taking into consideration the potential for a new pilot for our ELA program. We've been in the review for almost a year and a half now. When we began the review, our K-2 teachers said, hold up, we need to pause this entire review and look carefully at our K-2 phonics program, and that set the review back a little bit, but for really good reason. And as we've continued the review, the review team is looking at changes with the materials that we are currently using. We are currently using Teachers College materials for K-8, and there's been an overwhelming request from our teachers that we look at something different for that. We have been doing that, and it's very exciting. We're just starting our math program review. We've had, I believe, 3 meetings so far. We did a survey of our teachers, and we are having some early conversations about potential changes in that program that we're using as well. There are things to consider for our assessment next year. There is a potential change for the Department of Ed assessment that they're using for our state assessment, which will impact our price for that assessment because they currently pay for the assessment for our 3rd through 8th graders and our 10th graders. And if we are going to need to change that, then we're going to have to pay for that ourselves. There also is a lot of conversation in the district, which is very needed and very exciting around MTSS, which is our tiered supports and programming. And with that, we've now looked at intervention for academic, interventions for behavior, and we're bringing those together to look at that whole child. We don't have a screening tool right now for behavior, and there are many tools that do that, and there's a request to include those. So we are looking at some different assessments that might bring that capability in as well. For the ELA program pilot, we're currently looking at a variety of programs, and some of them are actually open resources, but there would probably be an initial setup with some new books for teachers, the read alouds, those types of things. So I did put in a placeholder of 50,000. We wouldn't go over 50,000, and that may adjust dramatically depending on if we do choose that open resource program. We have over 80 hours in this review time. It's been, and this is at the request of teachers. So I want everybody to be really clear that this is a very active group that's meeting frequently. And we've been doing a lot of research. We've done a number of school visits. Sorry for that typo. Ironic that that's coming up while we talk about ELA. And we have reviewed over probably 20 programs. So we're feeling very confident that when we bring a program forward, it's going to be worth the money that we're budgeting for. And there will be some instructional changes that come with that as well. Yes.
And is this where we're currently using Teachers College and we'd want to use something different, or was that for the math?
Yes.
Okay.
No, that's for ELA. You're right.
Just checking.
And yeah, and for math, we're currently using a program That has a considerable amount of workbooks, a cost for workbooks. So this is again a placeholder, because if we didn't use this current program, the cost is probably going to be offset because we wouldn't be purchasing all these workbooks. But we probably should have a placeholder in there to consider any professional development that would be needed there, potentially some new manipulatives or approaches that way. So again, that is a placeholder, and by the time Heidi brings her recommendations forward, we'll know a lot more about what those costs look like. And then for our assessment, and we are very happy with MAP growth, but there are some potential benefits. If the state did move away from that, we're going to make the best of the situation and look at a different assessment, which is going to probably be about 31,000. But again, would serve academic and behavioral needs. Yes.
And so, yeah, just on the MTSS, so the
Mhm.
program that like Megan has talked to us about, that's
Yes.
academics only at this point in time?
Correct, and this would help us to have, so for MAP growth, which you've all seen a lot of data around, that's just academics. We're looking at a new program that would offer academic screenings as well as behavioral screenings. And as students are assessed, it would offer us some more information about what is a good instructional strategy for that student based on the way that assessment is laid out. It would help teachers see what lessons or strategies would be super helpful for that student.
Thank you.
So we're happy with MAP growth, but if we do shift, there's some really nice, we can seize that opportunity and move forward with that. So those are my three big topics to discuss. Yes, Amy?
How does, I know the last couple years you've done some phonics pilots.
Yes,
How does that fit in with this?
that's an open resource. So that pilot those materials are free.
And you've selected the one that everybody's using?
Well, that's a good question, Amy. That is still in a pilot because we didn't want to decide on a phonics program before we decided on an overarching ELA program. But I think there's a pretty good chance we're going to continue on with that program. We're seeing some very good results with it.
And so have you moved to everybody using the same one? Or if I recall, there was
I think
three
there's,
different ones at different schools?
I think we're down to two right now. There's one other, which is a great program too, but it would be a considerable cost versus the open source resource. And we're
Is that the
seeing,
one that held all the?
yeah,
manipulatives? Yeah.
yes. And we're still finding ways to work manipulatives in. And I can't say enough about the letters training. I know I've talked a lot about the letters training, but it has helped our teachers use those open resources and the manipulatives in such a way that is changing our instruction. So I did not budget for a phonics program because if we did shift and purchase an entire different phonics program and the ELA, I'd have to come with you for a really responsible plan on how to ease that in so that there wasn't a huge cost up front.
So, sorry if I keep going. So we will likely have a new ELA program and a phonics. There's two separate things that work together. So
Yes.
This isn't all the curriculum. This is
No.
changes you wanna
No,
make.
these were just the big asks. So
Okay.
you will see that the social studies line has stayed the same. That was at $10,000. We're going to keep that at $10,000.
And we're still teaching phonics.
We're still teaching phonics. And the science material line has stayed the same.
Okay.
I think there's some other materials that are in there that we'll be keeping. I did move, I think, $2,000 out of the professional development line because with our shifts in the way we've staffed, the chief instructional officer, there's additional funding in that Title II line that we're able to use for professional development. So there's a tiny decrease there. But yes, we're still teaching phonics. We're really pleased with our phonics program, and we're really pleased with the preliminary data as well.
The Teachers College, we're doing an ELA. Is that the last Teachers College that we're still doing at this point, or are we using it anywhere else at this point?
There was an update to the Teachers College units that we did not purchase. So we're using, I think they're from 2016, but we haven't purchased any of the updates because we were in this process.
Totally. Because yeah, we haven't been ongoing paying for those updates. So
No, we have not been, and the structure of Teachers College has changed as well, and we are no longer budget. I think there was $20,000 in the budget for off-site PD. We're no longer budgeting for that either.
Gotcha. Thank you.
I have a quick process question, and if this isn't the best time to answer, just let me know, but so for the ALA example,
Mhm.
it sounds like you're close to, or you maybe have identified the platform or whatever that you'd like to use and the costs associated with that. Have discussions happened with the committee, the
No,
ALA committee?
no, that's
Yeah.
why this is very preliminary, because for us to even come forward with that pilot, we'd have to come to CIA and show you that entire plan and what that looks like. So these are all just placeholders for what might
Might be.
happen.
Okay.
And you may not, when we bring that to CIA, you may say, we're really not comfortable with this right now. So all of this is very preliminary.
Yeah, that group will be able to vet or work
Yeah,
with you. to figure
right,
out
right. And we'll
see.
bring that curriculum forward, how that looks. Because it would be some different topics, units in the classroom. So the slide, this is why I added that slide. So we'd bring that plan for those subjects. That would be also coming to CIA. There would be some changes with that. We'd bring those instructional changes and then assessment changes as well. But that would need to be vetted through the CIA. And probably a full, I would suggest a full presentation at the board level as well.
Yeah, I was just curious how we get to this point and kind of what the process is and,
Yes,
okay, thank you.
it should be
helpful.
coming soon.
All right, thanks so much, Amanda. I think Nick will take it now.
Yes, I think.
Yeah.
Just stand by. Yeah, I might need your assistance here. I'm great at telling everybody else how to get this to work, right? But all right. That's me presenting the budget tonight. My imaginary self. Thank you for the opportunity to discuss the technology budget as proposed for next year. This is the portion of this presentation where I take the opportunity ultimately to express my understanding of the role of technology within the school district, which is really primarily to support teaching and learning. So this is an AI generated image. That's not what our classrooms look like, but sometimes people get the idea that you're spending a lot of money on things that we don't need. And Amanda is conveniently right here. She could disagree at any moment, but I don't think I go running down the hallway excited about something and say, hey, can we buy this? It's really in consultation, careful consultation, I would say, with Amanda, with principals, with what's happening in the classroom, what are we doing instructionally that can support what you're doing, and it has a technological facet, if you will. So many things these days do, increasingly so. But I really do take this sort of charge seriously, that it's about teaching and learning and supporting that primarily at its core. I got the memo that you guys are interested in data this year. So everybody uses technology here, whether you're a kindergartner or you pick your employee, teacher and otherwise. Everybody is using the network and the access to the internet. So that I don't think comes as a surprise to anyone here. Our goal isn't for everybody to be using the network. Increasing screen time, that's not something we talk about. We talk about being very purposeful in using the internet and using screens, but everybody uses the internet. I actually don't know that I could have said this 11 years ago when I started here. That's just sort of become the reality, kind of supporting why the network needs to have that 99.9% uptime, right? Everybody needs it always for some reason. Again, core to teaching and learning primarily. So when there's a power outage, that's a concern for a school. Can we have a school open? We've talked about generators here before. Really, when the internet goes down, that is very disruptive for the classroom, for teaching and learning. So it has become one of those items that I used to say, don't worry about it. Remember when we didn't have the internet to a teacher? And they say, oh yeah, I remember, like it wasn't that bad. Now people do not want to hear me say that. It's a problem. I do have some actual real data here. This is just an export essentially, nothing complicated about this, pie chart of the technology budget. And I simplified it to some extent. I do have a more granular version of it, but really it comes down to a few little things and then hardware and software. And one of the trends that I would just identify again this year that is still a trend is that we used to be spending more money on hardware and other things, and that has just been shifting more so towards software. Software being a sort of a catch-all for whether it's an instructional tool where there is some sort of curriculum component being delivered, to Amanda's point, or licensing. And that's what software also covers in this case. So many things, most things are now licensed, and that cost has also been going up. So this is just sort of a big picture overview of where's all the money going in the technology budget. This is a really good look at it. Ooh, I skipped over that. The biggest chunk being software, I think is worth talking about. And I've broken it down into these three pieces essentially. So you can see that the biggest two chunks are the instructional material tool side and then district operations. And district operations, that's really the internet, access to the internet that I was talking about. That's the cost associated with inside, and outside to some extent, making sure there's wireless internet access. That covers the server side of things as well, some of the services that are being delivered locally, access control, cameras, HVAC, all the items that require a network presence, classroom technology, Prometheans, phones, all the things that have a cable and that are being plugged in. That's the cost covered in district operations. That IT operations chunk, that has more to do with how we have tools for the IT department to manage devices. So we have a one-to-one program. So every student has a device. Pretty much every staff member has a device. So it's thousands and thousands of computers. And then all of those other things I mentioned, phones, Promethean panels, everything that we need to push out a software package to, let's say, for state testing or a security patch. We don't have the staff, obviously, to touch every single device all of the time when something urgently needs to happen. And that's where that IT operations budget covers many of those items. So I don't mean to oversimplify all this. Technology is very complicated. I thought it was helpful for myself, honestly, to start to understand better where is it all going. And I think these three buckets of software are sort of, per my trend, good to think about or keep in your mind as costs continue to go up. So from an operating budget standpoint, MOE, maintenance of effort, a few details worth noting. That last one, software costs that I've been talking about, software costs continue to go up. I was talking with Evan earlier and telling him that, in the days of yore when Mark Conrad was here, he used to be pretty safe to do 5–7%. It's almost double than that every year over year for software licensing costs now. They just keep creeping up. So it's worth investigating, as I have, trying to find alternatives to the software that we do have, but I would defer to some extent to Amanda and sort of what we're doing in the classroom to fundamentally change some of those costs at times. I think last year there was an interest understandably in, hey, could we bring these software costs down? I think to bring the software costs down, we would need to use it less and rely on it less, choose different things that maybe wouldn't cost as much. And that's a process unto itself, as you know, going through CIA and figuring out costs associated. I have been trying to look more carefully at what is being used and how much we're paying for it, because that can also tell a story. If we're paying a lot for something, but it doesn't seem like students or teachers are really using it, I've been asking Amanda, do you want to renew this next year? Is this really meeting the need at this point? Maybe there's something that costs less that can better fit our need, and that's worth investigating and pursuing. The other two items on here, network data center, we have a piece of hardware that houses all of our servers that are virtualized in the data center at the district office. And that piece of hardware is about 8 years old now, and it's end of life. 8 years is a long time. Thanks for the whistle, Hudson. It needs to be replaced. The good news is that a year ago, to replace sort of our current network footprint, it was going to cost probably about $140,000 to replace. We've done a pretty good job of consolidating and contracting our footprint locally. Some things have moved to the cloud, other things we've just eliminated, honestly, and simplified. And so right now, it's about $50,000 to replace. Like, I have to buy a couple pieces of equipment, but there's a road there. The second one, access points and switches, those are replacement and licensing costs. So this is really the biggest increase, I would say, for the year upcoming that I was talking about earlier with Evan and Heidi. And these are basically a vintage of access point and switch. So access point, wireless access point, how you connect to the internet. Switches are what all the cables are plugged into that do all the routing, if you will, to tell things where to go safely and securely. There's some filtering involved. There are a couple of vintages of access point and switch that we haven't replaced since 2016. And the licensing part has sort of been a can we've kicked down the road. So to simplify it, when we built this high school and we put in all new equipment, all of the new switches and access points were licensed for 5 years. We got a good deal. We said, license them for 5 years. That 5 years was basically allocated also to all our elementary schools and middle school. So we didn't get 5 years. We got like 2.25 years on all of our equipment. Same thing has happened as we've replaced other equipment at the middle school and last year at the elementary level, where we sort of have moved that renewal date further down the road. And short of buying a lot of new equipment that we don't need yet, that renewal date is coming due next year. And there's an advantage cost-wise to doing it for more than 1 year ultimately. So that's the goal ultimately, but it's still a lot of money. The good news is that we have E-rate to help pay for a lot of those costs. So the replacement of switches and access points, as well as the licensing of all that equipment that needs to be renewed. So E-rate, it's a program that basically is a subsidy through the Universal Service Fund, and we get a discount based on our economic sort of disadvantage population, and we get a little more for being rural or considered a rural school district. So at this point, we actually, E-rate works in cycles. They give you a budget for a certain amount of time, and it's sort of use it or lose it. So we're at the last year of a 5-year cycle that honestly, I would have anticipated using sooner, except that due to COVID, here's some good COVID news, and CRF money, instead of using our budget from E-rate, we use some CRF grant funds to pay for things that we normally would use for E-rate. So it's really a great fund that I've talked a little bit more about with Hudson recently, so for his understanding and maybe lobbying, but it really allows us to increase access to technology. And if we have a project worth $405,000 in our case, we basically get a discount of about 40%. So it saves us a lot of money ultimately. And at this point, that's where you'll see, and maybe Evan will show you in the MOE budget, I can also show you where $250,000 has been added into to cover these switches and access point replacements and renewal licensing. So it will cost more than that. It'll cost like $412,000, I think was my calculation. But in order to get the full subsidy, you have to spend the full amount and budget locally for what your share will be. Any questions about that? E-rate's very confusing. A lot of paperwork, but it's a great program. A few remaining items that I just wanted to mention. This really should say rhymes with sheriffs. Tariffs, you may have heard something about tariffs recently. I'm mentioning this not to be funny, but to actually express some concern. Tariffs have always been a thing in the technology world because we're sourcing a lot of our equipment from overseas. And this is honestly a big unknown for vendors right now when I've been trying to get budget pricing on hardware, on things that we typically have more stable pricing provided for. So this could be nothing, honestly. It could just be a negotiating tactic, which it seems like maybe it was today. But this could also mean real costs going up for us. So a switch that might cost $5,000, I've had vendors say, you know, I'm not trying to scare you, but it could cost triple that. They just don't quite know yet. So we have some time to sort of ride this out a little bit. But if tariffs end up being something that we have to contend with, equipment will cost more. So from a finance committee standpoint, I just am trying to provide some information so you know in advance that it is a concern of mine moving forward. And I don't think it's necessary to maybe put a lot of money into a contingency fund. That's something you could talk about, Heidi, with Evan as a committee, but it is a concern. I just wanted to mention. Some other late breaking news that I got about a month ago is that our phone system that's relatively new is end of support and essentially life this coming December. So I would recommend replacing it in the next fiscal year. The reason why I put you could wait until FY 2027 is it's not a small cost. And essentially for 6 months, you might be able to ride it out as what I've come to understand with the system. So it's no longer going to get any security updates, which is a concern for me. It's not going to have sort of upgrades built in for compatibility. So if the operating system of a computer changes, the software might not work with it anymore. The phone will still work. So you could still make phone calls, but some of the other functionality and features that go with the phone system are just not being supported any longer. So this is honestly a little earlier than we had anticipated. I think when Mark and I had done the ROI on this, this was installed in 2019 and 2020, and it was famously timed for COVID. It did have some remote options that really helped us at the time. We thought that it would probably be about a 7-year sort of pay for itself sort of system. So definitely a little early. Some of the costs that I've come up with in the last month about sort of competing upgrade paths are listed up there. So unfortunately, the handset, the actual physical phones that are screwed to classroom walls on everybody's desks everywhere, those won't work anymore with any other system. You can pause for a moment of stupidity in the technology world, but they really are paired with this system that we purchased that is now being phased out. So that's really unfortunate that you have to replace all of those. Moving forward, that range of $60,000 to $100,000 a year is really based on probably not buying a physical system that lives in the district office anymore. We were sort of at the cusp at the time in 2019. Most more modern phone systems are cloud-based, and they usually work a little bit better. They come with more functionality. The phones that I would recommend purchasing wouldn't be tied to that cloud system that we chose. You could use the same phone for another system if this sort of announcement came down that we're not supporting the phone system anymore. So there's a range in there because depending on the system and what you want to pay for and how you want to license a teacher, let's say, you could pay more or less. You can have phone systems now that will just be an extension and a voicemail without any of the software sort of components. And then other ones that At this point, we have software that helps us, send us an email with a voicemail and provide a transcript and things like that. Some of the other features just cost more to license. I'm putting this in here as a placeholder. AI in education in our district is still, I think, being very much determined how we want to use it, if we want to use it from a policy standpoint or procedural guidance, as has been discussed at board meetings and in our task force. So this number started off much larger, but Amanda and I have been sort of having an ongoing discussion. I think it's why you come to work every day, Amanda, probably. It's very riveting and enthralling, yeah. Around what's a good starting point if we end up wanting to use AI in a safe and secure way, having teachers access it, having students have the possibility of accessing at a grade level potentially or something like that. And this is an amount of money that right now Amanda and I feel comfortable as getting us involved in providing some tools, essentially, not the Cadillac, but providing a platform that we could start to access as a community and potentially grow with, I think is how I'd put it. I don't know if you have anything you want to add. You're off mic, but what more could you say, right? Yeah, slide speaks for itself. But so this, again, isn't in your operating budget that I think Evan has an updated sheet for you in, but that's sort of a placeholder amount, I would say. Questions?
That AI number is the idea that that would be towards like subscribing to a specific product that would come with training as part of that cost. Is that the thought?
Yeah, it would, it's not a huge amount of money, but yeah, it would have sort of some PD built into it and support built into it, not just the free version of something, which would sort of align us better with a data security sort of policy and an agreement. So it's usually worth spending a little bit from what I've understood so far to secure your data. And also I think it's, we've talked about this a little bit on the task force, but it's changing really quickly, to overstate something obvious. And I think that is really difficult for a district of our size to sort of figure out what's the right thing. I think at a certain point, it's helpful just to pick something or a couple tools and say, let's try these out for a year. And there's going to be some pros and some cons, and we'll figure out what we like and we don't. But that's better than saying, good luck, be careful. There's a lot of free stuff that can do some really great things for you. That's not quite far enough, I think, in my opinion.
Yeah, thank you.
Great, thank you, Nick. That was great. I really appreciate it. And Amanda, thank you as well. Nick, are we okay with the camera? Yes. Should we check just to make sure?
It's still broadcasting. It's just not.
Okay. Great, thanks. Yeah. All right, so moving on to item 4, there's a follow-up on, initially the intent here was to see if there's any discussion that the committee wanted to have amongst ourselves with this, but then we also have Evan here to help walk through an update or two, I believe, so. And 4A, let's, for the purpose of this, we'll just say that there are one agenda item, so we can kind of talk about it all together and as part of this, Evan. So do Amy or Hudson have any questions, thoughts, concerns, or, anything you wanted to talk about out of the last couple weeks of presentations? I have nothing in mind, and not to put you on the spot, just wanted to have a chance for us all to talk if there was.
I don't think so. I mean, I'm curious to see our ED 279, but that's out of our hands
Yeah.
at the moment.
Yeah, most of the discussion I'm anticipating will come, but
Yeah.
just if there was any to have.
This is included in that topic or a different one, but are you going over your pages that you gave us, or are we just? Okay, then I'll wait.
All right, Evan, you are up.
Is this on? Okay. So the first piece of business, I did meet with Nick this afternoon. I provided here the MOE draft number 4 and 2 changes to it, to 2 lines, one of them being software licenses, which is object code 4330. We did increase this line by $175,000. And then the equipment line, we dropped by $105,000, which netted out to an increase of $61,000.
1 second. So just for clarity there, Evan, what we have here in front of us is draft 3.
Should be draft 4. Oh, it says 3 on the top because I didn't change the,
Okay, but that is 4. No,
That's
that's
4,
fine. That's the clarity I needed. Thank you.
yep, sorry about that. And that, the licenses primarily is about the switch upgrades that Nick touched on and the expense associated there. And then the equipment line we dropped down because we think we can get away with some of the Chromebooks that we currently have and not having to upgrade those next year. So that is the MOE update that I have there. Really, what I think we should talk about, I don't know if you need to announce it, but was about the warrant corrections from 24 and 25.
You're fine. We just kind of combined 4 and 4A, so we're good.
Did these change?
They did, yes. And that changed.
Is that part of the warrant? No.
Yes, it is. And that, the reason that changed is because the question you had asked about if we are confirming that the transfers happened, when looking back at all those warrant questions that we talked about in the email. This is an outline of all the transfers starting in fiscal year 2018/19. And after considering all of the transfers that happened, the new anticipated fund balance is the sheet that I provided today.
So no funds went into the capital reserve fund? Or is 24-25 on here this year? So anything that was put in the budget last year would not be reflected on here, or it would be?
Should be 2 pages.
I guess, so on this, what do we call this? Page 3?
Yep.
The column that says proposed warrants, 5/16/2024, that has all blanks in it,
Those just transfers have not happened yet.
but they still are
Slated to, yes.
ready to,
Yep.
okay.
I think one of those things is we're waiting for a fund balance number before.
No, I understand, yeah. Okay, so it's not like what we thought happened last year didn't get written down. It's planned for this year. It's just
Correct.
not on the sheet.
That is correct. So yeah, that side of the work has been completed, making sure all the transfers have been accounted for. The side that the DOE is really curious about is making sure that all of our paperwork lines up. They said it won't hold up our subsidy, but they do want to see the formal changes in our warrant articles to match up so that they can procedurally on their side make sure it all matches.
So I guess my question would be, how do we go about that?
Also my question, I talked to Andrea, our accountant today, who did a lot of the work on this, and it was like, should we rewrite all the warrants from last 2 years and have people sign off on them again? And maybe we do, instead of that, maybe like an amendment of some kind.
The state wasn't prescriptive on what they needed to see. They just needed to see that it was addressed in
Correct,
one way or the other cleaned up.
correct. Not sure if that just involves writing a paragraph for both of the fiscal years and acknowledging that there are errors and then saying what they should be and then having the board sign off on it. That seems to be the cleanest way, I would think.
That seems cleanest or clean and also helpful for next year or 2 years from now when somebody says, wait, what happened?
Right,
And there it is, all explained,
right, and,
rather than just a fund transfer.
right,
Breadcrumbs are good.
yeah, I would think so.
It seemed like we're doing that and attaching it to it for, the historical viewpoint of it or whatever, like that's just a clean, easy way to do it.
I think so, and I think that'll be helpful for the auditors too.
Yep.
Seeing that we've addressed it.
And my apologies. I think I must have missed something. So where is the discrepancy that we're trying to fix? I'm so sorry.
Okay. I don't know if I put that over to you, but fiscal year 24,
Yeah.
Article 14. And I can send, I don't know if I gave you that paperwork, Hudson. I apologize for that. I can
Gotcha.
also
That's
pull-
okay. No, I mean,
pull it
don't
up
feel
here.
obligated to me, please.
I prepared for this, so let me share my screen. I apologize, this first page is sideways, but then the rest of them,
I think you can fix it with that little circle thing.
yeah, but then it just changes all of them and I'd have to go back and do it again, sorry. Okay,
There it is.
Article 14 documented that it was $446,000 that we,
Gotcha. So that's the $60,000.
and then, well, and it should have been 505. And I'll
Right.
show you, let me scroll down here, rotate it back. Oops, went twice, sorry. So the math in here does not add up correctly. So what the number should be is $505,000, but we listed in Article 14, 446. The voters actually voted on 505. It's just our documentation shows 446.
Gotcha.
And that's where the problem is essentially.
I see. So there's not a problem with the actual monies spent or in reserve. It's just the documentation of how the monies were appropriated.
That's correct.
Okay. Apologies for my being behind, but I appreciate your walking me through. Thank you.
No problem.
So last year, the two documents didn't match?
Correct.
In
So this is fiscal year 24, and then let me pull up fiscal year 25, which is a similar case.
They were still catching ahead of this year's audit, so that's something.
We did it twice?
We did it twice. Let me rotate this again. Zoomed in. This one is warrant Article 18. It's really only meant for food service, but we included a $20,000 transfer for the Orion. So if I go down to warrant Article 18. Oh, I did it again. Sorry, guys. Okay. Still see it up there? So we just need to correct this amount right here in Article 18. The $20,000, I believe, gets reflected in Article 12 already, so the money's been appropriated correctly. It's just the documentation, once again,
Okay.
goes outside of the state guidelines for how it should be documented.
And at this point in time, what's needed is a vote by the board of directors to adjust the warrant for documentation, not to go back to the voters and the public.
That's correct.
Okay, thank you.
that-
And that's based on guidance from the state. They didn't tell us exactly how to do that, but that's what they said they needed.
The state was very unclear on how they wanted it done.
But they were clear, like, they just needed clearer documentation. They didn't need anything
Correct.
beyond that.
And the recommendation from Mark Conrad was to present it to the finance committee first, and then maybe you all present it to the board for voting or however you choose to do it.
And just for one more piece of clarity, the reason the state said it was okay to address it this way is that the voters did approve the correct amount.
That is correct.
Okay, so I think that that's good clarity for anybody to hear that.
Right. So the voters approved the correct amount, and we have documentation of the correct amount. We just have this additional document that has, for better or worse, typos on it.
Correct.
Or no, let's call them typos, whatever.
Typos.
Okay, so we have to fix this.
The other thing I want to point about 19, and I'll send over this documentation as well. There are a couple more errors in here. So on the summary page that we submit to the state, sorry, that was 24. This is 25. We say Article 22, but on here we put it in 23. So there's a couple more of those instances where there's typos that don't quite line up. I'm happy to take a stab at correcting all of those errors and then presenting it to you all maybe next week, but maybe providing like a summary sheet or something, but there are typos that don't line up to what is in this physical document here to the summary sheets.
I think it would be great if we can get all that cleaned up, come back to this committee next Monday, I believe. And then we have Thursday board meeting, so we could include it in the agenda with a plan to be presented there and voted on and approved.
Mhm. Yep, and you can put everything in one document, one new.
Okay.
Here's, could you? Does it make sense to put the blurb in the agenda, but then one new replacement document?
Sounds
with
great.
The articles laid out as they should be.
And Amy, maybe Heidi can coordinate with Peter on what the language of the motion should best be to clear this up if we want to make sure it's appropriately clean. But I think the document's the most important thing, and I have total faith that you
Yeah.
would do that.
Sounds good.
Thank
Hey,
you
yeah.
for bringing this to our attention and fixing it.
Yeah, and I want to, give Andrea, the accountant, our accountant for the district, a lot of credit for finding all of these issues and working to correct them as well. So she's really been instrumental in this, so for the record.
Thank you.
Thank
I
you.
appreciate everybody's diligence in getting this addressed and taken care of. All right, I believe with that, you didn't have anything else you wanted to speak on tonight?
No,
I don't think you did. I'm not putting you on
nothing
the
else from
spot,
me.
just making sure you got a chance. All right, and with that, I guess our fifth agenda item is public comment. Seeing that there is none, we will call it an evening. Thank you very much.